Welcome to Acts Christian Church, where you're the head and not the tail.
Well, we're here again on a Tuesday just to bring you news from our community. Well, I am really, really honored to have in the studio with me today no other than Chief Inspector Craig Knight from the Metropolitan Police. I've worked with this officer for years, and I found him to be very supportive, especially in our community. And again, it's a great honor to have him, that we can talk about certain things that are happening in our community. Thank you so much, Chief Inspectors, for being here today.
Thank you. It's a real privilege. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. I really wanted to cover the subject of racial profiling, which we will talk about, and also stop and search. But in light of the recent tragic loss of Sgt Matt Ratana, the fatal shooting that took place, not too far from here. In fact, a couple of yards away from here. It has rocked our community, and we even did something as a tribute towards him. I didn't know him, but all the great things I've heard about him was such a lovely person. Did you know him personally?
Yes, I knew Matt very well. He was one of my team for a number of years. And I was able and lucky enough to know him for some time. He was a great man, and everything that they're saying about him in the press is absolutely true. He was a wonderful man and will be sorely missed.
Wow. I'm sure that he was a person who finished what he started in lots of things in the force. Would you say so as well? Would you agree?
Absolutely.
You gave him tasks and...
Yeah, he was someone that I could give any task, however complex, knowing absolutely that he would go away and put his heart and soul into it, that he would resolve it, and that I didn't need to worry once I'd given it to him. He was somebody I could trust implicitly. I worked with him in the world of public order, and there were many a times when I absolutely relied on him.
I was wondering how... I see the Metropolitan Force, the police force, whether use that word or that term or services, as a family. And, you could be going down an area and all of a sudden a police might say, clear the area, get away, move. And you might think to yourself, oh, that's a bit harsh, but they're like a big brother. They're taking care of us, aren't they? I'm wondering, how is the Metropolitan Services, the police services, feeling at this moment of a loss of a family member?
Yeah. We are a family, you're right. And what is really important is that it's not just what has been described as the thin blue line by many.
I've always heard that expression.
Well, it talks about the line that police officers take in front of other people to protect them.
Yeah.
That's why it's there. It's why the term is used. But that thin blue line, for me, is much a thicker line. It's a much thicker line because the community that we work for and protect, they stand behind us. They have their shoulder on our shoulder, their arm on their shoulder. On our shoulders, and they are absolutely supportive of us. 99.9% of the community that we serve want us to be there.
Wow.
Many of them are silent majority,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Yeah.
But I want our communities to know, and I want you to know that we are here to serve you. It's why we joined 29 years ago for myself, sorry,
That's
25 years ago for myself,
fantastic.
29 years ago for Matt.
Wow.
We put our life and soul into serving the community.
And I think it's only right to thank you. Many of us might not understand that. And we know the first time, if we do get into trouble, we're going to pick that phone up, we're going to call that number, and we're expecting to get a reply, get somebody from the services to come and support us. And so, I want to personally thank you for all that you are doing in our community. And not just because of what's happened, but we got to understand that in one day in our lives, we will pick the phone up, maybe if it's once or twice, and ring that number, and you will never fail to come. So thank you so much. And, my heart goes out for the family as well in this very, very, very sad period of time. And it was interesting to know that all the churches also gathered in solidarity and in support of what's happened. And I think we have now seen even much more forging of the church community coming together. Would you agree with that? I'm sure you've also worked alongside us in events that's gone by.
Yes, absolutely. What's been really interesting and really, for me, really moving is how everybody has come together. The community as a whole has stood behind us, stood next to us. They have hugged us as far as they can under COVID. They're there for us. And it's so moving to know that Matt will be known by many of your congregation.
I'm sure.
He will be known in Selhurst. He will be known across London in many respects because of the work that he's done in the last 29 years. It's, I think, so important when the community stand with us. We feel as if we're not alone. And there is a real danger, isn't there, with any incident that communities feel alone. And we should never feel that way. None of us.
Well, we want to thank you, and our prayers go out to his family. And I'm sure the family, the services are there to support.
I can't tell you how much that means to myself and to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving on, we are in a pandemic.
Yes.
COVID. And I'm always curious of how the services are managing to do their best to stop law violations from breaking law, and also being in a position of protecting yourself around this time. How are you managing this in this COVID pandemic?
So in terms of the response that we're putting together, it's very much alongside all of the other emergency services.
Right.
We are there to, enforce to some extent the laws, which are ever changing, as we know. They change on an almost daily basis.
Yes, all the time.
And we are as affected as members of the community as anybody else in that regard. What I would ask people to do is to, as best they can, understand why those laws are being put in place and why they're changing. They're changing because we're beginning to understand more about the nature of the virus, understand how it's spread, and what's happening in our communities, particularly as more tests are done. We're beginning to understand better, I think, how that's being spread. In terms of what our police officers do, what my police officers have been told, enforcement is a last resort. We don't want to enforce. We will encourage, we will explain, only when absolutely necessary will we enforce. And I think it's really important that people recognize that if they need to wear a mask, it's for a reason. If they need to not congregate in groups of more than 6, it's for a reason. Because it isn't just about saying, let's stop the virus. Let's stop the virus affecting our families, those most vulnerable. Because if I don't have any symptoms but have the virus, I can just as easily spread it to a colleague, a friend, a loved one, and particularly if they are vulnerable, elderly, then they're in real danger, and we have to respond to that.
Well, that's why I wanted to talk to you also, and I loved the way that you've led on to that about enforcing the law on these fines directly. I'm sure that's the that's the last resort that you want to actually go to, and giving a person maybe £100 fine to £1,000 fine. But as you're saying, it's got to be done if we're going to keep COVID away from spreading in our community. So
yeah, it has, and I and my colleagues don't want to fine anybody.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we've it's very much a last resort that we ever do that. And if you look at the numbers actually that we're enforcing, it is a tiny number. But it's the tiny number of people that just don't listen to us saying, please do as you're told, or do as the government have asked you to do, because there's a reason behind it.
It's real, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, we're seeing facts, we're seeing figures, we're seeing people die. So it's not a myth, it's reality.
Absolutely. The World Health Organization in the last few days have said there are likely to be 2 million deaths as a result of COVID. Now, obviously, not all of those are in the UK. Very clearly, they're not. Of course. But I don't want to see anybody die as a result of COVID if we can prevent it, and if we do the best we can based on the laws that are coming into place, often on an hourly basis. And I know how complex it is for everybody and how difficult it is for everybody to adhere to that, particularly when that environment is changing so rapidly. But we must do what we can.
And do the services have any special training on COVID?
Nope.
Wow.
No, we have, obviously we get a report on a daily basis as to what's changing in the COVID environment. We brief our officers as to what that looks like, and the changes to legislation. But very often, because of the very nature of this disease, we get as much notice as the community get.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow. When you're doing public orders and holding people at bay and demonstrations, you're just kind of using your initiative, your experiences, and hearing what government guidelines have, and putting all those things together to enforce and do good policing.
And it's a balance, because I acknowledge I'm a public order commander as part of my role, and I acknowledge, as do my colleagues, that people have a right to protest. They have a right to their individual beliefs, and I want to encourage them to be able to do that, but equally within the law. And it's very difficult when you have 1,000 people in Trafalgar Square or more protesting for whatever their cause is, because it's difficult for them to socially distance in that environment. And of course, they're effectively putting my colleagues, my officers
at
that
risk.
I put there at risk, because they have to go home to their loved ones. And I have had officers that have been infected by COVID. Clearly, we probably all know somebody that has.
Yes.
Whether that's from protest or not, I've no idea, and I don't think they do either. But let's just do what we can, all of us, to make sure we're all safe.
So it's so interesting to hear this, because, as I said, you are on the line. You're there preventing, holding back people who want to break the line, and again, at risk that the force, or the services that protects us, if they're not properly covered or doing the right thing, then you're going to have less police on the streets because of this. So I do understand. So, wow, you're out there on the front line. And I think it's important for our viewers to hear this. But, as I said, we call 999 and they're there. Some of the things that they do, we will never, ever know. And that's why I'm really grateful for an opportunity to speak to a Chief Inspector, giving us the insights that, I'm going to say it, not our enemy. They're there to support us. And maybe we've had bad experiences in our lives. Of course, I always say if you put 100 plumbers in one room, there's going to be one that's going to be a bad plumber. But I'm saying not all of them. And then the one that is good, you're going to call them back time and time again because of the good job they do. Again, this is an insight which I'm really grateful, Chief Inspector. Let's move on to another area which is always seemed to be out there at this moment: racial profiling. We had an MP the other day that was stopped.
Yes.
Because they thought it was in a lovely car, the color of their skin. How would you break this down? Do you believe there is a lot of racial profiling from young policemen out there that are just maybe trying to get themselves known, or just try to rub maybe the ethnic minority up the wrong way? Or is it necessary? And what is the steps towards this?
It's a really interesting question, and I'm really pleased that you've asked it. In terms of racial profiling, I don't believe that it is routinely done. I don't.
Okay.
I believe that officers are doing the very best that they can under what are often very difficult, trying circumstances to uphold the law. And when you consider there are well over 6,500 pieces of legislation that a police officer has to adhere to and to enforce.
Say it again.
6,500. There's probably more than that, actually. Last time I looked, it was well over 6,500.
Wow.
If we include COVID, it's probably a lot more than that every day. But it is, stop and search is only a tiny part of what we do, a tiny part. Whether it's safeguarding children, whether it's dealing with mental health, whether it's protecting an individual on the street who's been harmed, whether it's administering first aid, counter-terrorism, firearms, CBRN in terms of chemical biological incidents.
Yes.
You name it, police officers deal with it. And very often people kind of forget that stop and search is a tiny, tiny part of what we do. That being said, there are pieces of legislation, there are a number of pieces of legislation that allow police officers, in uniform and sometimes out, to conduct stop and search. Now, if we put this into context as to why we're doing stop and search, it is a national priority and certainly a London priority, and for me a personal priority based on my values, to protect people from knife crime and harm. To do that, we have to use stop and search. Every day, just in Croydon alone, we take around 2 knives off the streets of Croydon. And these aren't tiny kitchen knives or peeling knives. These are weapons.
Right.
And any weapon, any knife that's taken off the streets, whether it's found in the street or taken from a person in a stop and search, is a homicide potentially prevented. It's a murder potentially prevented. And I and many of my colleagues have been stood over young people who are being helped by paramedics and us, trying to save their life because they have been stabbed or injured as a result of a weapon on our streets. That's fundamentally why we do stop and search. That's why we're here in London.
That's what you feel justified by doing that, preventing
Absolutely.
a life being lost.
Now, in terms of the way we do that, because that's really important around this idea that people have around racial profiling.
Yes.
So let me explain, if I may, exactly how that
we need, please,
happens.
talk to our viewers.
So what we do is I will provide my officers with the very best intelligence that I have as to where knife crime is occurring, where harm is occurring, based on previous incidents, based on what's being found in the past, and based on gang and other information that we get. I will then place those officers in those areas to conduct stop and search. Now, when
intelligent-led, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Intelligent-led.
Absolutely.
Right.
Now, where we have specific information that a person with a red jacket is carrying a weapon, we will respond and try and stop people with red jackets. But often we don't do that. We don't have that specific piece of information. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So we base it on other things. One of the things that we utilize is when we're doing a stop and search for other pieces of legislation, we may well find other things. So, for example, many of the searches that we do in London are based on drugs.
Right.
Cannabis remains illegal. There is a debate to be had, which is way over my pay grade, in relation to whether or not it should be legalized, and that's a debate for somebody else another day. But at the moment, it's against the law.
Right.
Where my officers smell cannabis on a person, see cannabis being smoked, or potentially where they see cannabis being dealt or smoked or smoked shared, they will conduct stop and searches because they do it under a piece of legislation is called Section 23 of the Misuse of Drugs Act.
Right.
But what it really means is you're doing something against the law and we need to intervene because that's what we do.
Right.
Now, when we do that...
So it's a law that allows you to stop...
Absolutely. And there are a whole number of different pieces of legislation that allow us to stop and search somebody. One of them, for example, is the Badgers Act. You probably won't hear it very much in Croydon, but we can stop people and search cars and people for offences against the Badgers Act. Aviation security, all sorts of different pieces of legislation that we could use.
Wow. The
main two are what's called Section 1 of PACE, which is where we're searching for a weapon of offence or weapon that's likely to be used in something like a burglary, so a screwdriver, that kind of thing. Or Section 23 of the Misuse of Drugs Act in relation to the illegal possession or supply of drugs. Those are the two main pieces of legislation.
So can I just say, so every stop, in a sense, it's not just stop for the sake of stopping. There is a bit of legislation that allows you to
Absolutely,
stop.
absolutely.
See,
But I think it's also important to say that sometimes we come up to people to talk to them.
Right. It's not always that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not always that.
Right.
I did a little bit of foot patrol this afternoon just before coming here. And I didn't stop and search anybody, but I went up to a number of members of the community, some black, some white, and some, there was a Chinese family as well that were walking by. And all I did was walk up to them, socially distanced, say good morning, wish them well, make sure they were safe, and reassure them that we're there.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of my officers just do that. It's not just about fearing that you're going to be stop and searched.
Right.
So I don't think, and I genuinely don't think, this is a hand on heart note, that my officers are racially profiling individuals.
Right.
What I do acknowledge is that the number of black people in North Croydon and West Croydon are disproportionately stopped. Now, that's for a reason.
Okay.
The reason for that is twofold. First of all, we are intelligence-led, and if I went into areas of Surrey, Sussex, Kent, as an example, then I would expect to be proportionately stopping more white people because the street population is more white-orientated.
Chief Inspector, how strong is that intelligent-led information?
Some of it's very strong. It depends. In terms of, I will put officers based on historic offences into communities.
Okay.
So one of the reasons why we are in areas like West Croydon at the moment is because that proportionately there is more violence in West Croydon than there is in other parts of Croydon at the moment.
Right.
So I will put more of my officers in there to stop that violence, to stop people coming to harm. I also have information that there is more drug supply associated at the moment in that area.
Right.
So it changes in terms of the picture, and we will respond as to where that picture changes. But that's why you will see more officers at the moment in West Croydon,
right,
and where potentially we'll move to different places for different reasons. And there's nothing to stop a member of the community just coming up and saying, "Hi, officer, lovely to see you. Why are you here?" Okay. Sometimes it's just because we want to make people feel safe.
Right.
Because nothing stops us, and will never stop us, from simply patrolling to keep people safe.
Right.
Because an officer's presence in an area,
of course,
helps.
Of course.
And it helps the community. It helps if a child is lost. It helps if a person has a mental health breakdown.
Yes.
It helps if there's a shoplifting in the street.
Yeah.
It helps. So officer presence in the community is really
very
important. And a lot of my officers at the moment are going into these communities across Croydon and Bromley and Sutton, the areas I police. And they're simply going into premises of shops and commercial businesses and others and saying, "Hi, we're here. We're reassuring you. We're just here to help. Is there anything that is going on in your world at the moment that might need it?" So that's important. Now, let's go back to the question of the stop and search.
Of course, yeah.
Because I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So when you are stopped for whatever reason, what I would encourage is that people are polite, because officers should be polite.
Good.
There is a piece of equipment, piece of equipment here, called the body-worn camera. Now, that will be switched on.
Who switched?
The officer switches it on.
Right.
Do it.
Turn it on.
You get a little red sign there, and when it's switched on, well, I normally do this. I'll show you in a moment, because it's normally on my belt, so it's much easier to do. But that's switched on, and that will record what is taking place in that stop and search. So the officer will tell you who they are, why they are stopping you, and they will tell you that you are entitled to a copy of the search record. And please don't be afraid to ask for that if you feel that you'd like it.
Has any police officer ever forgot to turn it on?
It does happen occasionally.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
The compliance is about 97, 98%.
Right.
Sometimes the battery runs out. It's a battery-operated thing.
Okay.
And sometimes they genuinely forget.
Okay.
But 97, 98% of the time, that will be on. If you don't hear that sound, and there'll be a red ring that appears in the middle, just ask, is your body-worn camera switched on? Because they should tell you that as well.
So we, as the public, can say, is your body...
Absolutely. Absolutely.
camera
And
on.
none of my officers will ever say,
It's interesting.
no, it isn't, because they'll check and say, oh, terribly sorry, it's not switched on. Here it is. It's switched on.
Good.
And that
That's
gives
good.
you a sense of some protection, and also, frankly, a sense of protection for the officer as well.
It's brilliant.
So
Brilliant.
it's there. If you want to record us. Yeah, there's nothing to stop you from putting your mobile phone out, but do please bear in mind, please, how that impacts the officer, because when you have 20, 30 cameras in an individual's face, an officer's face, that's very intimidating.
That's really interesting.
So just maintain a distance. Just say, officer, out of courtesy, I'm just going to record you, and record us.
Wow.
I don't record well. I have a face for radio. But if you want to record me in the street doing a stop and search, by all means do that. And my officers, of course, can be videoed. But then I would ask you, if you have clips that you are concerned about, to tell us, not to put them onto social media.
That's where I usually see those.
That's where you'll see them.
Yeah, on
and
social
what
media.
we often see,
Yeah.
and I can't talk about specific cases.
No,
obviously.
of course not.
But what we often see is that we see a tiny snippet of that particular interaction.
But we don't see the rest.
We don't see the rest. We don't see why that person is being stopped. We don't see what happens. We don't see whether anything was found.
Right.
And there are a number of cases that I'm aware of where the circumstances are not as they appear on that clip of social media.
Got you.
But that said, we have a number of websites that you can go onto the Metropolitan Police website and complain. If you feel that stop and search was unjustified, complain. We have a system. It's on the Metropolitan Police website.
Yeah.
You can give us feedback. If you don't want to complain and just tell us what's going on, you can do that too.
And they will be taken seriously. Every single case.
Every single one is recorded. Every single one is taken seriously. And I'm responsible on this area for stop and search. So I look at the number of complaints.
Amazing.
I look at the number of officers that are injured as a result of stop and search encounters, and what we're finding. And about 3 in every 10, roughly, we are finding something that is illegal. Now, that's not to say that the officers are stopping 7 people out of 10 that are the wrong people.
Right.
It's just that sometimes people discard things.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if there's a group, they stop the wrong person. We've had information recently, for example, where a group of 5 or 6 people were seen brandishing a Rambo knife.
Yeah.
And the officers stopped 2 people, searched them, didn't find anything. The other parts of the group dispersed and they couldn't find them. But it's possible that those people took the knife with them. So don't think that because, there's always lies, damned lies, and statistics, isn't there? Because an officer has that sort of 3 out of 10 in terms of successes, that doesn't mean that they're not stopping the right people.
Right.
It just means that on those occasions, they're not necessarily finding anything.
So you would say stop and search is a necessity. It's important that it happens.
I believe it is. I think and I acknowledge that it can be a bit of a blunt instrument in times. Sometimes
I've been stopped 19 times, 14 times. I've got up my skin or the car I drive. But
yeah. And the reason that we stop people, for example, in cars, is often because of the Road Traffic Act. Now, the Road Traffic Act allows an officer to stop a car to check for old tyres, erratic driving, even things down to whether you've got water in your washer bottle. So an officer can stop an individual for those reasons. It's often not because of the type of car that you're driving or the colour of an individual's skin. And I think that's really important to distinguish. Let's
look at that. So that's really good. So it's not about a black person driving the car, beautiful car.
I don't believe so.
Right. Would you actually radio ahead or check out the car if it's before you stop it?
In each of the cars, there is a little computer system that we have that allows us to effectively check every vehicle that we stop. Now, what that will come back with is the car insured? Is it taxed? Does it have an MOT? It won't say, obviously, the registered owner and the keeper of the vehicle will show. So it might be Mrs. Miggins owns this red Ford Fiesta, and the vehicle isn't taxed because she might have forgot. So we'll stop the car, we'll advise them that the car isn't taxed. At that point, if there's a shotgun on the back seat that Mrs. Miggins has, we'll probably take a look at the shotgun.
Okay.
But it allows us to stop any vehicle for the purposes of the Road Traffic Act to make sure people are complying. I would also point out that, as you've said at the start, out of every 1,000 officers that I have, one might be a bad apple.
Right.
And when we identify those, we sack them. And I and my colleagues, of the 999 out of every 1,000, we don't want those bad apples because we don't believe that they represent our values,
Exactly.
the values of the people of London, or the values of our communities. So if you think that there is an issue, tell us. Please tell us. I implore you to tell us so that I can deal with it. And rest assured, I will.
Now, that is interesting to hear. So every stop in a person's car is, again, whether taxed, insured, whatever, will allow you to stop. Nothing to do with the colour of the spit skin.
Nothing at all.
It shouldn't be that at all.
No, it shouldn't.
At all.
No. That should make absolutely no difference.
No difference whatsoever. It's just about erratic driving, no insurance. That's the inquiry. And but what should be the behaviour of the individual if someone has been stopped by the police? I mean, it sounds obvious, but what should be the demeanour?
I would just start, and I've been stopped a number of times, and I think the key is just be polite. We don't live in America, so we're not going to shout at you if your hands aren't on the steering wheel and that kind of thing. But if we do, it's because the officer feels that there might be something else there, or they might have seen something on the seat that they're worried about, and just comply.
Right.
The officer will have body-worn camera on, so if at a later date you wish to complain about the way you were dealt with, we can deal with that. Of course we can. What I sometimes do, particularly if I'm stopping a young person or a person that feels that they are being hard done by me stopping them, is I will ask a member of the public passing by to just stop and wait and just view what I'm doing.
Really?
Now, that's not done routinely. We don't have to do it, and the member of the public doesn't have to stop.
Right.
But sometimes it helps, just so that person that I'm talking to reassure that person that I'm not here to do anything other than what is fair, ethical, and within the law. League as accountant, doctors, and that's really sad because it's such an important profession to be in. With nursing, you have to have a degree. With policing, you will very soon have to have a degree, and we're starting that pretty much as of September this year.
Wow.
You'll have to have a degree, and there's apprenticeships now where in the first 3 years of your training, you gain a degree, and that's paid for by the organisation.
That's interesting.
So in terms of encouraging people to join, we have a cadet scheme, which actually is really well represented in the black and minority community groups. But what we don't do, I think, well enough, is to encourage those young people and support them to then join as regular officers. We do have some, and there's some outstanding officers that I work with that have come from the cadets into the regulars. But I'd like to see more of that. I'd also encourage people to think about the wider police family. So
civilian
police volunteers, the member of the special constabulary, you can join. You don't get paid, but you get to get trained as a police officer, and you get to see get to see whether or not it's a career for you, because you can test it if you like. And we ask a small amount of hours per month, which you commit to working, and then you're trained as a police officer, and you can see whether or not it's a career for you.
Wow.
And that's how I joined, and many of my colleagues joined through the special constabulary. And I think there are other routes as well. I think talk to people that are police officers, learn their stories, because it is such a wonderful career. I've been lucky enough to be a police officer for over 25 years now.
That's wonderful.
And I've had a roller coaster ride of training, of trauma, of excitement, of abject boredom at times. There's a lot of paperwork, I'll be honest, there's a lot of paperwork. But the reality is, it is an outstanding career. And the reason it's an outstanding career is because it's a vocation. It's something that I believe I was called to.
That's an interesting word.
And
called to it.
and I think my service to the community
Yeah.
is part of my values. It's who I am.
Mm.
So if you are keen to serve your community, if you are keen to make a difference, one of the best ways of doing that is to be a police officer and to serve our community.
And you have open days and things like that in recruitment. Open days where
Yeah,
people can just come
absolutely.
in, look,
and
make a decision
we have
from there.
absolutely. We have a number of mentors and coaches. We have a number of youth workers that can come into schools, classes, churches. Absolutely, churches will certainly come and talk to you. Of course, we will, and to extol the virtues of being a police officer.
Excellent.
Talk about what's involved, the kit that we carry,
Of course,
and also why we carry it as well, because it can look quite intimidating sometimes. And just to listen to the stories, because I think that's the real value of being a police officer,
Yeah.
particularly with a few years' service. You gain a lot of stories which are fascinating for people, not just, am I going to get stopped for speeding, or
there's more to that, isn't it?
there's a lot more to it.
Chief Inspector, how would you say that the relationship with the community over the years has gotten better, stronger, a more of understanding? I mean, a program like this, again, gives us an insight to the world of policing. So from your standpoint, how do you feel that the community and yourselves are working? Has it got better, got stronger? We're learning from each other. How would you describe that?
I think we're learning every day. I think that we are growing every day as a community. If you think of the community as a family, we don't always get on, and that's the reality,
that's
isn't it?
reality, yeah. That's right.
But that doesn't mean we can't be critical friends and we can't love each other.
Right.
And I think it's really important that, as a community, we listen, because the police need to listen to you as a community, and you need to listen to us as a community, and that we respond to that, because somebody much wiser than me once said you have two ears and one mouth, and as a result, we have that for a reason. So we listen twice as hard as we talk, and we must listen to each other. We must respond to each other's needs. But I think we're getting better. We're not there yet, and let's be honest, the relationship is still strained in many parts of London. But we are getting much better.
Let's home it down to Croydon. This is our patch. What would you say the relationship is like? I mean, look, especially with our churches, obviously, doing something like this, there must have to be some type of foundation. What would you say over the years? Has it got better with the churches?
Yes, it has. I think it's one of the best relationships that I've ever known as a police officer.
That's great.
The relationship that I have and that my colleagues have with churches, with faith groups across Croydon, from multi-denominations and faiths, is excellent. It really is. And that's so valuable, because regardless of your faith, the ability for you to respond and be heard by us, and for us to be able to interact with you, is so valuable. And it's part of the story, isn't it? We have to act as a community.
I can be honest with that. 2 years ago, we had the churches coming together, and we marched through Croydon.
I remember. I was
and
there.
you were very instrumental in supporting us with that. And it went extremely well. To the point, I remember we had a knife sweep.
That's right.
Oh, my word. I couldn't believe what you said, could we stay behind some of the ministers and do a knife sweep? Yeah. The things we were finding. But I couldn't believe that.
How incredibly powerful to do that together. It's so meaningful, because it means that I can show you, my colleagues can show you, the sorts of things we're finding, because you were finding them alongside us.
We found them with you.
And the ability for us to listen to you, to say, you need to keep doing this, Craig. You need to keep doing this, police force, because you are stopping our children from being killed.
Thank you.
And that shared experience was incredible. I was there.
You remember that?
I do.
I mean, I was
shocked very well.
When I couldn't believe the knife I found hidden in the bushes around Queen's Gardens. Yeah. I was shocked. Yeah.
These things are out there. They continue to be out there.
I believe you.
And I guess there's a plea that I have, which you've probably heard several times before, but it comes from the bottom of my heart, and it goes to every one of you. The plea is this: if you believe that there is a knife missing in your home, or that you think your child, your nephew, your niece is involved in some way, in any way, in knife crime, tell us. That it's not about anything other than the ability for us to prevent them coming to harm. And we have a number of ways now, at the early stages of people's involvement with knife crime, not to criminalize them, not to make them a criminal. So we can talk to them.
Are you seeing mothers and fathers coming to you in your office and saying, listen,
absolutely,
I'm worried about my son, I'm worried about my daughter.
Yeah. Mothers, fathers, teachers.
Coming.
Pastors. We are seeing people coming to us and saying, I'm worried about little Billy because he or she is involved with the wrong crowd.
Wow.
And we go and talk to them. We explain to them the consequences. I don't want young people to come to harm. No. And I don't want, as I have in the past, to be stood with my hat under my arms at a door of a family telling them that their child isn't coming home tonight.
Right.
And I don't want to be calling you to your colleagues and friends to say, can you support this family? It's wrong. We have to stop this.
Yeah.
And it isn't about putting people in prison. Sometimes we have to do that.
Okay, I understand that.
Sometimes we have to. But it is about caring for people. It is about caring for our community, because there are people out there on our streets that, for whatever reason, carry knives. Some of that is to be involved in crime. We need to accept that. Some of that isn't. Some of it is because they fear crime. And I want to understand why people are carrying it, and I want to stop people carrying them.
Inspector, do you believe, round this up now, but we want to go through what you wear every day, but
of course.
Chief Inspector, how would you feel that one day every officer would carry a firearm?
I wouldn't carry one.
Wow.
I know that many of my colleagues won't. We don't want them. I don't think we need them. Obviously, what happened to my friend Matt is absolutely tragic, and I'm deeply affected, as is everybody in London by that. What I would say, though, that it's just because that has happened, it doesn't mean we all want to start carrying weapons, because where does that end? Do we start driving around in tanks? Because ultimately, that's where it ends up.
Wow.
And we're not there. We are a community. We police the community. We police by consent. And that means that we need the support of our community to police. We can't do it without you. We can't. Everybody out there that's watching, I cannot police without your help. You have to come to us and tell us what's happening, because if you don't tell us, how can we deal with it?
That's right. That's right.
And I am here to help. We are here to help.
So we're blowing away the whole myth of he's a snitch. If he talks to the policeman, that's not what it's about. It's not what it's about. We need to break this myth. This nonsense. Whether grass, snitch, whatever it's called. We need to break that down, and we need to say need to say in reality, what is the reality here? The reality is that some of our young people are coming to harm. I don't want that. I don't believe for a moment anybody in our community does. I don't even believe that the gang members want to be stabbed to death. The reality is that the reality is that these people need help. They need support. Some people who are persistent criminals need to be put into prison to protect the wider community. But that's a last resort. This is about protecting our community, protecting your family, protecting your children. And until we start acting as a community, coming together, providing shared information, not because you're a grass or a snitch, but because it's the right thing to do. And regardless of your background, regardless of what you might think, if we can stop a young person being stabbed to death, that's got to be right, hasn't it? Of course.
That's got to be right.
Of course.
And that's what we should be focused on.
Thank you so much. I hope we just picked that up, because it's important. And even in being a minister, hearing these things, witnessing where the flowers are put, so young, had so much potential, and just taken away from us in such a young life. If we only knew and could prevent it, they would be with us today. And we do value the work that you do on and in our community. I think what we're only left to do now, I mean, you've covered all the parts. I think it's great. You've given us a wide insight that you are our friends. We need to work with you. We understand that you are a part of a wider family that protects us night and day. And we will be the first to pick the phone up and call you. And you will come to us and will protect us. You've helped us how our demeanors should be when we are stopped and when we are searched, and how we should conduct ourselves to maybe just make sure that things are in order. These are very important insight that we need to hear. And I've taken them on board, because who knows, I could be stopped. But it doesn't mean that I'm targeted. And people might think, not at all. What are you talking about? Of course it is, because you're black. But there's much more to that. You're saying there's loads of legislation that gives you the power to stop and to check it out. Yeah. And we should be grateful for that.
We have to be honest with each other and open and transparent. And when, as an example, when I put people into some parts of Croydon, the reason I do that is because 80% of the victims of street robberies in those areas are young black men between the ages of 14 and 23, victims. And around 75 to 80% of the suspects described by the victims, not by police, but described by the victims, are young black men between the ages of 14 and 23.
Wow.
Now, that means that 75 to 80% of the people we should be searching in that area will be young black men in that age range. That doesn't mean we want to target them, it means we want to protect them. And if for a moment we had a situation where that was reversed, and we had a situation where the victims were 75% white men and 75% white for suspects, as we have in parts of other areas,
of course.
Sutton, Bromley, certainly in areas of South Croydon. I would not look, when I look at the stop and searches, my expectation is that 75% of the searches in those areas are against young white men. That doesn't mean it's disproportionate. It means it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I get you.
And we have to target where we know suspects are of a particular type, age range, ethnicity, clothing, that we target those people that we think are committing the crime. But we need to do that professionally.
Oh, yes.
And in the right way.
And again, most of all of this is about depredation, isn't it? A lot of people in poorer areas.
Some of it is, not all, but some of it. Absolutely.
Which kind of fuels that, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's good to hear that, as I said, at the end of the day, it's intelligent-led. You have a lot of things to prove.
Can I come in there? 'Cause it's a really important point you've raised around social deprivation and around deprivation.
Social deprivation, yeah.
I've just commissioned some training. We've just completed it, where my officers have had the experience of 4 or 5 young black men coming into our training and telling us their stories. It was so immensely powerful, because where my officers turned around and said, yep, I had a father figure, yep, I grew up in a middle-class environment, often outside Croydon, these people turned to us and said, well, I didn't have a father figure. I grew up and we couldn't put food on the table on a Tuesday afternoon because the electricity switched off on a Wednesday, and we couldn't put it back on until the money came through later that week. My parents grew up very poor, and I have to ensure that my officers who don't have those shared experiences understand.
Training is so important there, isn't it? To understand, or you're just going to be looking in one direction.
So please don't think that my officers are as naive as they were 2 weeks ago even, because we've just commissioned this training and there's much more to do. But we're looking at how we can extend that training out to every single officer on our area, so that people start to understand potentially why these things are happening and the backgrounds. And we don't automatically go in there and say, we're going to judge you by our standards and our behaviors, because clearly they will differ.
I got you. I mean, that's so interesting. That type of diversity training as well. And
it's so important. So important. Yeah, it is.
So they've got a broader knowledge of what's
happening. And it needs to be taught by the people that have those shared experiences.
So, that's interesting. So there's avenues for people to come in and do some
Oh, yeah.
training
Yeah,
with the
we're doing
police
it now.
in this area.
We're doing it right now.
Fantastic.
All of the people that are training us in relation to the black community or in relation to particular areas of diversity are from those backgrounds.
Very good. That would really help a lot. Inspector Chief, it's been brilliant having you with us, taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing with us and, communicating to the church, the wider church, that, we're here to partner with our local services. And I know you're itching out there, want to know what is all this about. But, I had an opportunity of weighing them and holding these things, and they really do weigh a lot. And to have them throughout your shift, because obviously it's your protection. Could you just walk us through?
Of course.
Just walk us through.
So this is the standard kit that we carry. The first thing, obviously, of note, which we've spoken about briefly, is our body-worn camera. They differ in design slightly now. The new ones that come out are a little bit bigger.
This has just been introduced, hasn't it?
Yeah. So these are new, but we're already getting a new piece of equipment which is even better, even more accurate, with better sound quality.
Okay.
So even more protection for everybody with that piece of kit. This is our new radio. It's about the same as the other one, but in essence, that's the radio that we use to communicate day in, day out. I can make calls on it as well. Currently switched off. The dark piece of equipment here, this vest, is our. It's made of Kevlar and protective equipment. It's a bulletproof and stab-proof vest. Wow. That's the bit that weighs quite a lot. And inside that are the various pieces of paperwork that we have to carry with us. I also carry in there a number of evidence bags and some rubber gloves, latex gloves, in case I have to put those on to administer first aid or to deliver a stop and search. That's obviously the jacket. And then this kit belt, which I'll just take off here. So hopefully you'll be able to see that. The first thing you'll note there is our extending baton. That's very rarely used, but occasionally used in sort of public order environments or when we need to smash a window to get into a car. It's not, it's not used for much else. The next thing there is that little black key, which is the handcuff key, which I'll come on to the handcuffs. This is the torch. This actually is probably used more than anything else on my belt, which is our first aid pouch with plasters and small pieces of first aid equipment. We have a much bigger first aid kit in every car, which is used for members of the public. This is for us if we cut our fingers or just get basic cuts. This is our incapacitant spray, sometimes called CS or pepper spray.
Okay.
It's not actually CS or pepper spray now. It's something else. But in essence, this is sprayed into people's faces, and it, largely speaking, is effective in stopping them from doing anything or attacking officers or other members of the public. And obviously our handcuffs, very contentious at the moment, use of handcuffs. Lots and lots of people saying that we shouldn't use them. I believe that we should in the right circumstances to protect both the individual and ourselves. What we do need to do, though, is ensure that our officers are properly trained so that when they are used, it is used in the right way, and where we can, we explain why we're using them.
Excellent. Do you use a spit guard? Do you carry a spit guard?
I do. It's obviously not for me. It's for the person that is spitting or biting at me.
Of course, yeah.
That I will place on somebody's face if they need to have that placed on them. That's only done if I perceive a threat of being bitten. I have sadly been bitten twice in my career. It's very unpleasant. And the series of drugs that I've had to take afterwards for 3-4 months to ensure that I don't get hepatitis or HIV has meant that it's been very restrictive for my own personal life.
Of course.
And a lot of my colleagues have gone through that experience. The spit guard stops that from happening.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm left just to say thank you so much, Chief Inspector Craig, for coming in and to sharing with us the work you do. And I just, from my point of view as a minister, pray that he gives you strength to continue. And I pray that this has been an education to everyone that's listening today. And I think it is, for me, I feel the only way forward as a minister in my community is to learn and to listen and to support. And if I do have a son or a daughter or you out there that may be going in the wrong direction, I think it's good to know that we do not see our services as an enemy. They're there as a family to support us. And this is about education. I've learned so much, even in this period of COVID, that we need to come together. What I traditionally do is just kind of pray and for strength. I hope you don't mind.
Not at all. We love you.
That you'll just execute your duties to the best of your ability. Father, in the name of Jesus, we do thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. I never knew in my lifetime that I would have this opportunity, and don't take anything for granted. I just raise to you Chief Inspector Craig Knight. We thank you for his openness and his honesty in sharing with us the routines that he goes through. And I thank you for educating me and those that are listening that they are part of our family. They are the ones that will tell us to clear from here, to move from here, because danger is ahead. I pray that today has really opened our minds and our hearts to understand that they're set here to serve, just like the body of Christ, just like the Christian community, to serve. Father, we ask you, as there is pain at this moment going through that family, we pray that you will soothe that pain. We raise him to you and we give you thanks for his life and for all that he does in the community. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, Inspector Craig.
Thank you. It's been a privilege.
Fantastic. It's just been an eye-opener, and thank you for taking time out of your precious time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hope you were blessed, and we'll be back with you very shortly. Thank you for watching, and be safe.
How to give by bank transfer. Our account number is 03101-928. Our sort code is 309607. How to give online through our donor box. Simply go onto our website and click the Giving tab. Then scroll down to the bottom of the page where you should find the link to our donor box. That will take you onto this page. Simply type in the amount that you'd like to give, for example £10, then click Next. Enter your first name, last name, your email, your address and your postal code. Then click Next. Then enter your long card number, the expiration date of your card, the security code on the back of the card, your billing postal code, and then donate. And it's that simple.
Christian Church, where you're the head and not the tail.